Welcome to the Alchemy of Healing podcast. I'm your host, Erica Carroll. For over 20 years, I worked as an actress in film and TV, until my health forced its way to center stage and demanded I focus on the alchemical process that is healing. Along the way, I had to examine preconceived beliefs around how to optimize my body and how to empower myself to find solutions. I know how lonely, isolating, and hopeless chronic illness can feel. And the Alchemy of Healing sessions aim to enlighten and inspire new ideas to help you find your unique path back to wellness. So join me while I speak with experts in diverse fields of self-care, practitioners, biohackers, healers, and folks like you, who are the true experts of their own bodies, sharing their personal stories of how they transmuted from surviving to thriving. Welcome, fellow alchemists, to another AOH episode. Today we are joined by Judy Lamontange, a somatics practitioner, yoga teacher, and wellness coach from my hometown of Duncan, BC, Canada. Judy's journey began as an athlete seeking adventure and fitness, but it has since evolved into an exploration of her own body, mind, and spirit. Through the practices of somatics, yoga, mindfulness, and meditation, Judy has experienced profound shifts in her physical movement patterns, emotional behaviors, and attitudes towards life. As a personal trainer, wellness coach, and somatics educator, Judy's deeply passionate about helping others unlock their full potential and discover their authentic selves. In today's episode, Judy will share insights from her own journey, discuss the benefits of somatics and yoga, and offer practical advice for anyone looking to embark on their own path of self-discovery and transformation. So without further ado, let's immerse ourselves in yet another enlightening conversation with our guest, Judy Lamontange. Hello, Judy.
Hi.
I'm so chuffed that we're going to get on the mic and have a chat about your experiences and how you've gone from a triathlete to, fitness trainer, then to now somatic work and yoga practitioner. For anyone listening, Judy resides in my hometown of Duncan, BC, and I recall when I was in my 20s that Judy was the go-to personal trainer in town, but I never did get a chance to work with her until 30 years later, until I had to go back to Duncan. And my friend and producer, Krista, we recently did a 3-day somatic experience with Judy, which was amazing and very enlightening, learning about places we were holding tension and parts of our body that weren't even connected to the earth. Yeah, it was an incredible experience for our bodies. And I'd love to talk more about that just maybe later in the episode. But just to kick everything off here, would you mind sharing your backstory?
Sure.
How did it all happen?
I was always very athletic, and I started running in my 20s once I had babies, and loved that. And it was easy. Running was, it was very comfortable, and started the very first so-called race I ever went in. There was someone standing on the side of the road with a big microphone, and he said, "On your mark, get set, go." So there was no electronics and no pads, no bracelets, nothing.
Right.
And there was probably 50 of us. And that was my first experience, 8K. And then it just progressed. So I did short runs for a while, worked into marathons. And then it's kind of like, okay, so what's next? So I started riding a bike. And then I took swimming lessons. And from the swimming lessons, I became a lifeguard and then taught swimming. And then just kind of shifted into doing small triathlons. And then same thing happened. It's like smaller ones became a half. And then after doing the half, it was like, I went and watched an Ironman once, and it just captured me. I wanted to do one so badly.
Oh, wow.
And I never aspired to do it in, a set time. I just wanted to be able to know if I could actually do that, if I was physically capable. And then I found out that I was. So I doing it 4 times. Yeah. So, and then during all that, I was in a really bad car accident, and I was working at the pool then, and they wanted me to do their physical therapy through ICBC. And I I started the program, but I found it made me worse. So I decided that I would create my own program, and I got better quite quickly. So then I became a personal trainer after that and started helping people with recovery from accidents. And then it just kind of morphed into full-time work where I set up my own studio in my home. And yeah, I had one employee through all those years. Her name was Suzanne. And together we worked like full week, both of us, doing personal training. Yeah, so I did that for quite a while. And then I had accumulated other injuries from doing triathlon, tightness in the hip. Never stopped me from doing anything, but I couldn't sit for very long without getting really uncomfortable. And so I tried everything imaginable. And then one of my friends said to me, I heard about this work. It's called somatics. Do you know what it is? I said, no. But give me the phone number. I'll do anything to get rid of this constant pain. So I did classes, a 6-week session of classes once a week, and some hands-on work with a fellow named Greg Augustine. And at the end of that 6 weeks, I didn't have pain. And so I was thrilled, but my brain is like, okay, so how did this happen? How does this work when nothing else works? And so I went to a 3-day intro down in Big Sur, California. And on the second day of that, I was sitting outside at lunchtime, and I just knew, like deep inside, it was like, I have to learn this. I have to do this work.
And this is 17 years of being a personal trainer is in between this time. Yeah. And then you were like, I want to learn somatics. Okay.
Yeah. So I was still working as a trainer when I went off to somatic school in California.
Right.
For 3 years. And it was life-changing. I spent a lot of time. You can't do this work without doing the work. And when you do the work of somatics, you learn a lot about yourself. So it's very insightful. And when you start to really look deep into your own self, it can be really uncomfortable. So I had lots of tears. I had to do lots of shifting, changing in how I perceived myself and the world.
When we talk about somatics, I've had experiences with different therapists who do a type of somatic work. What's the difference between that we're doing? Because they sound different.
Yeah, they are different. So somatic experiencing is more talk therapy. And so a therapist will listen to a person's story, but then have them describe where they feel it in their bodies. And the somatic practice that I do, so I'm actually called a somatic educator.
Okay.
So what I do is I help people to understand and learn about their own bodies and their different patterns of holding. So every one of us have created patterns of movement, patterns of holding ourselves. And it may have started out because of an accident or some kind of an injury. So there's this protection going on somewhere in the body so that we stop using different parts of our body and we develop what Thomas Hanna calls sensory motor amnesia. So in that part of the body isn't functioning as it should or as it could. So other parts have to take over, and that creates an imbalance. So we have muscles constantly contracted and pulling on our bones, pulling them out of alignment. When the skeleton needs to be in a certain position, our bones need to be in a certain pattern. Our muscles, when they're chronically contracted, pull us out of alignment. So now tendons are affected, ligaments, joints. So now we start to develop pain in the body. So as a somatics practitioner, educator, a client comes and I will look and assess on how they are holding themselves, how their body is organized in this moment. And then we listen to the stories of how they think it's become that way. And then we look at the patterns, and together we do a technique called pandiculation. And it's about moving the person into their pattern consciously. This is the magic, because mostly what we do is unconscious and habitual. So when we start to move consciously into our pattern, then we also move consciously out of it. And in doing that, we are getting the brain's attention. And the brain then realizes, oh yeah, I had that on lockdown a few years ago. We could probably let that go. So you start to address those places that you're not conscious of, that you've had habitually contracted. And then you begin to open the places up, open and release chronically contracted muscles.
I don't know if you can answer this, but for example, like you were saying, someone has an injury to their shoulder and they contract or pattern forms. If someone, heard it immediately and knew, oh, if I go do somatics right now, I can just, cut that pattern off at the beginning.
Exactly.
Why do we hold in a spot where there was an injury?
Well, it's the brain's natural way of protecting. So an injury has occurred, say to a shoulder, and so we hold it tight because if we move it, there's pain. And so we start to protect it. We hold it tight. So then you're not only holding where the injury was, but now you're starting to contract through the center of the body. Now you're creating an imbalance in how you're walking, how you're moving. Anytime you go to reach for something, if that is tender, you're going to totally distort the way you would normally reach. So normally a reach is free. If you have an injured shoulder, what do you start doing? You start rotating the whole body to reach something, to hold something. So now we're also engaging the rib cage, the spine, maybe even the pelvis has to rotate when before you could have just reached out with your arm.
Just for example, I was at an appointment with a chiropractor a week or so ago. We've been working on me being able to press on one side, press on the other side. And it was interesting because I went to press and I registered that I was like, oh, I'm pushing harder than I normally would. And then I realized that there was a pattern of me not pushing as hard because I knew past a certain pressure, pain would engage.
Right.
And when I pushed, I was like, oh, there's no pain. I'm stronger. So is that kind of like an example of what someone could experience internally?
Yes. When I start to work with someone who has a lot of sensory motor amnesia or contracted muscles in the body, the movements are probably very, very small. So asking a person to move into, say, move an arm into my hand, the movement would be very small the first few times, knowing that it's safe. So we're creating safety because when we have an injury, the body goes into fight or flight protection. And that fight or flight is hardwired into the primitive part of our brain. So at one time in our lives, we needed fight or flight to keep us alive. The way we live now, fight or flight is too easily triggered when we're not really in danger. So fight or flight contracts a whole set of muscles in the body. And there's different patterns in fight or flight. So we have three main ways that people kind of torque their body. We call it red light, green light, and trauma. I'm very much what's called a green light posture. So when I go into fight or flight, I contract all the muscles in the back side of my body, extensor muscles, and I stand up straighter. I push my chest forward. My head comes up. My legs are locked. My buttocks is contracted and my feet turn out and I'm ready for action. But the whole backside of my body is contracted to do that. If I do that enough times, I get locked in. And that is where a lot of back pain, neck pain, pain in the hips that's where all that comes from. The red light posture is more of a withdrawal response. So it's like things are coming at us and we're like, whoa, this is too much. So we get this curling in, more of a protection of the front of the body. Our head will tip in, the knees roll in. So people that are a little bit knock-kneed, maybe a little pigeon-toed, the feet tend to have toes that curl under. It's just little things that start occurring, creating hammer toes. And we basically are closing down also our breathing. So we become very shallow breathers with that. So it affects the whole body from your toes right up into your face. And then again, if you are experiencing stress, and stress can be no big major event. It can be a word that someone says to you that creates stress in your body. It can be a thought. Every single thought that a human being has creates some kind of reaction or response in the body. So if you're always thinking negatively, you're going to be in some kind of habitual lockdown. And then we don't even notice it. And it becomes part of who we are. So if you go out and you people watch, you'll see these types of patterns, people that are rounded, people that stand with their chest right out and stand tall. And then there's what we call trauma. So if I had an injury on one side of my body, then people tend to be a little bit swayed over to one side, or there's more weight on one leg than the other. One shoulder is more contracted than the other, a little bit of a tilt in the head. For years, I always had a little bit of a right-sided tilt. So all these things, they're habitual and conscious. And when you look at yourself in the mirror and you have one of these patterns, you won't see it because it is familiar. You don't feel it. You don't see it. It's your familiar.
And then I'm assuming your intuition is pretty darn sharp at this point with all the practice you've had.
Because I've been doing this now for 12 years. And so when I have someone coming to see me, I have big windows in my treatment room and I watch people walk in. I watch them get out of their car if I can. And then I watch them walk in. And then they come and they start taking off their coat, their shoes. And I'm just observing how they do all these activities. Even like sitting down. Is it like a collapse in the chair or are they actually sitting?
For sure. And so all of those things are telling you a story.
Yeah. And the story, every body is the story of that person's life. So all the things that have happened over their lifetime, they're actually holding it somewhere in their body until they've done some kind of body work and released it. But from the people that I usually see have tried everything and haven't been able to get rid of the tension in their bodies. And so by the time they get here, there's a lot of stories in that body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we tend to grow attached to those stories too. You can only go as far as someone is willing to participate. But do you find that quite often? Like you can bump into people's creative narratives?
Yeah. Their perceived ideas of what's going to help, what isn't. And quite often when people are on the table, especially the people that are kind of, they're trying it because someone suggested it, but they don't. It's like, yeah, right, whatever. My wife sent me. My mom sent me. and they're non-believers, but really, I don't have to say much. I start doing the work. And within a very short time, they're usually poking their head up and looking at their own body. It's like, what did you just do?
Yeah.
That feels incredible. How did you do that? It's like, it's called somatics.
I think there's a notion that, I know for me in my early 20s, I had been in a couple car accidents and I thought, deep tissue massage where I'm on the table and I'm sweating, and I'm just breathing through it. That whole no pain, no gain thing, I didn't realize I was actually really sensitive. So I really was going into fight or flight when I was allowing these deep, deep massages that I'm squirming on the table. I recognize, like you said, like the non-believers, and they come in, and it's a whole new way of perceiving how you
And
can access the body, right?
yeah.
So that must
And
be pretty rewarding for you.
it's
When
incredible. It's incredible. Even in a class. So sometimes people will come into my somatics class because they just came to the yoga studio at a certain time hoping to go to a yoga class.
oh,
They're somatics. They've never done it before. So when we first start the class, I could see them kind of looking at me like, "Are you kidding me? This isn't yoga." I was like, "No, this is not yoga. This is somatics." And somatics is a mindfulness practice, whether you're in a class or on a table with a practitioner. I'm asking you to think about, how do you move? So in a class, we lift your arm. The question is, how did you do that? Do you have any idea how you lift your arm? And usually the answer is no, because you just do it habitually. So when you have to stop and think, how do I lift my arm? It opens up a whole new world inside that person.
when I listen to I have a recorded session from you, my eyes are closed the whole time, and I really feel like I'm like a little mini me inside. Like I'm like in my shoulder blade. I'm like, what's happening with my shoulder blade right now? And also I can almost communicate with my shoulder blade. And like, okay, you can release now. Oh, where's that tension? Oh, interesting. What's holding in there? Interesting. So that's the mindfulness.
Yes. And it's not something that we're taught when we're young. We're never taught to explore our own bodies. But until you regain that awareness of yourself, you can't make big changes. So it's so important to look inward and notice how you're holding yourself. What am I doing in this moment? So as I'm sitting in this chair, even, it's like, I'm not comfortable in this chair because it's got a little round back. So I'm curved in my center and I'm kind of squirming in the chair.
Yeah.
But 10 years or 20 years ago, I guess now, I wouldn't have noticed that I was slumping in this chair. So somatics isn't something that you only do with a practitioner or in a class. It's a way of living. It's a way of being in the world. It's like I put my shoes on. Are my shoes pinching my feet? Well, then I shouldn't be wearing those shoes because now they're affecting my feet in a negative way. When I get in my car, how's my seat adjusted? Does it actually fit me? Or am I having to lift my head up like this to see over the steering wheel? That's brilliant.
Yeah, because then 15 minutes down the road, as opposed to you paying attention to that, oh, this isn't comfortable right in the moment. 15 minutes later, your neck gives you a prompt and it says, now you've tweaked something in your neck and you're getting a sharp pain up your head. And and it's true. You got to really be present in the moment. I think that's what just doing the little practice that I got from you, even yesterday I was like, oh gosh, what's going on? I'm feeling frustrated. And so, okay, so I can sit here and roll up in a ball, or I'll go for a walk, and then I'll locate where it is in my body and see if I can breathe with that. And like, what's that connected to something? And it's just me getting nervous about doing a podcast tomorrow. So
often our emotions are attached to the body, but we have no idea. It's like, oh, I feel kind of nauseous. What is that from? Well, it might not be what you just ate. It might be how you're feeling. And how you're feeling is affecting because you're not breathing with your diaphragm. So a simple thing like breath, we work on that a lot in the classes. So you want to actually feel how you breathe. So if you're only breathing here, you're not using the diaphragm. Middle of the sternum to the throat. So a lot of people breathe up here. These are called your secondary breathing muscles. The diaphragm is the main breathing muscle of the body. And it's like this beautiful dome of muscle. Mm-hmm. And when we inhale, it pushes down. And on the exhale, it relaxes back up. So Inhale is work, exhale is relaxation. When that diaphragm comes down and it pushes on your stomach, whatever's in your stomach also now gets pushed down, and so your digestion is better. So breath isn't just about breath. It's about your digestion. It's about elimination. It's about food passing through the system faster. It's about it not fermenting and becoming toxic in your gut before all the nutrients are taken out. So you have this better digestion happening when you can breathe with your diaphragm. And the diaphragm is also connected to your spine, T12, and then into the lumbar vertebrae. So if the diaphragm is not working, it's being held under your rib cage, so is your spine. So we start to lose that fluidity throughout the lower spine. So every part of us, if we concentrate just on the breath, calms your nervous system, and now all of a sudden, now I'm digesting better. Plus, when we're in our parasympathetic nervous system, it's called rest and digest, repair. So the body is in this place of calmness where it can repair tissues that need help. You're digesting better, and you're also getting all the oxygen that your body needs.
What are some common issues or concerns that clients seek somatic therapy for? Or are the majority of people just kind of newbies and they don't know what they're in for?
No, most people come to me. I'm kind of the last exit on the road. So they've tried everything else. And because somatics isn't well known yet, they've tried everything else. They still have their pain, their discomfort. And so then they come for somatics. So quite often it will be low back, hip pain. That's very, very common. Shoulders. I do a lot of work with feet.
Yes, I experienced that, as did Krista. Yes. Krista had, her toes weren't engaging into the floor, and then my feet were very rubbery, if I recall correctly. Yeah, so you gave just such simple little redirect, but I really noticed when I came in and Krista was leaving, I could tell her whole body, she almost looked taller.
Yeah.
Just because she engaged her toes?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So you want to think about your feet as the foundation of the whole body. So when we go into fight or flight, our feet also go into fight or flight. So the muscles in the feet are contracted and all the toes are contracted. So if you keep that contraction in your feet and then you continue to walk around with contracted feet, first of all, you're not creating a solid foundation. Because in fight or flight, people will either have their toes up off the floor, not even engaged, or they'll be gripping the floor into what's eventually becomes what's called hammer toes, where the toes curl under. They're not doing much. And then the bottom of the foot, there's actually 4 layers of muscle on the bottom of the foot. So when we're gripping with our feet, we have very tight feet, right from the toes right into your heel. So everybody's heard of plantar fasciitis. I deal with that.
Is plantar fasciitis from people doing the clawing of their toes?
It happens with both. So with the pulling up of the toes, you're creating a lot of tension in the bottom of the foot, but the gripping also is creating that. So and that connects from the big toe mound, the big toe joint, and the baby toe joint. There's fascia that comes from those places and connects right into the center of your heel. And then also connecting into the center is the Achilles tendon. So if the bottom of the foot is shortened and contracted, that fascia is pulling on the heel bone, and then your Achilles connects into that. So now we not only have tightness in the bottom of the foot, now it's coming up into the lower leg and the calf.
Right.
So now when we walk, we need to be able to completely flex and point our foot. Flexion is when we land on our heel, the foot is up, and then we roll off the foot and we push off with our toes. That's your propulsion. When the foot is rigid, all you're doing is slamming the feet down into the ground. There's no rolling. There's no propulsion. And we have 3 arches in the feet, and they kind of act like little springboards. So we get a soft landing, and then we have this beautiful push off where the foot should relax. But if the feet are tight, it's like wearing blocks of wood on the bottom of your legs.
Like wooden clogs.
And then walking like that. And it's just like such impact, and it comes all the way up into the knees, the hips, the spine.
So ideally, your heel's going to come down, you're going to roll across, like you're going to engage.
Yes, you're bending the toes right at that joint. Yeah. So you're creating that off, and then the pelvis just gets moved forward.
At the end of our sessions, you had Krista and I walking across the floor, and I was like, this is so easy. Walking is so much easier when you're doing it properly, because it was just that propulsion was really evident. Yes. And I mean, this isn't rocket science. This is like, don't we all know that that's how you walk on your feet? But again, that unconscious, habitual patterning. And
it's like for an instant, it's like having a little float. It's like there's a float in space, and then the foot comes down. So there's this ease. When you have those blocks on the bottoms of your legs, the brain then has to figure out, how do I get that leg up and forward when she's not going to push off with her toes? What do I do? Now, you're going to create discomfort and pain all through the top of your pelvis, because you're going to hike your hip up, contracting muscles in the low back and the side of the waist to pull that leg up off the ground and then slam it back down. Yeah. So it's like this, it's kind of like watching a prehistoric creature, like, don't like this.
Almost like Frankenstein, the way Frankenstein walked. Yeah.
And that's one of the walks I see often is this, it's like a tipping from side to side, because they are not using their feet at all when they walk. So it's, you lean to the left, so you pick up the right leg, and then you lean over to the right as you pick up the left leg. Now, so it's creating so much tightness in the middle of the body.
How are you doing with your sleep at night? Not so good? Well, let me tell you about one of the actions I incorporated into my nighttime protocol to help bring on sleep in a naturally induced way. I use the blue light blocking glasses from Bond Charge. Now, just like everything I come across, I had a healthy dose of skepticism that using just a red lens would do anything for me. So I was genuinely shocked that within an hour of wearing the glasses, I started to feel sleepy and ready to hit the hay. Now, you may be wondering, why is blocking blue light important to improve your quality of sleep? Well, daylight triggers cortisol to keep you awake in the day, but as darkness falls, the red light spectrum, think setting sun, campfire, and candlelight, signals the pineal gland to prep for sleep by secreting your sleep hormone melatonin. So yes, staring into the flickering blue light of your TV, computer, or phone screens after dark can trigger your brain to think it's still daytime. So if you're looking for a tool to enhance your sleep and well-being by naturally encouraging melatonin production, block the blue light. If this info inspires you and you want to try some of these products, go to bondcharge.com and use the code AOH15 at checkout. You'll get a sweet 15% discount from a sweet bunch of peeps who want to help you sleep better. And now, back to our combo.
So this brings up a good point as we're aging and starting to hunch forward and get that hunch. Can you stop that from happening?
Definitely. Yeah. And a lot of that starts right at the hip flexors. So where your legs connect into the torso. So many people spend so many hours sitting.
Yeah.
And also in the back of the body, we have what's called your psoas muscles, PSOAS, and they come off of the lumbar vertebrae, T12, and then each lumbar vertebrae. They go through the inside of your pelvis and they connect into the inner thigh. And when we go into fight or flight, so it looks like this down through the pelvis. When we go into fight or flight, psoas is one of the first muscles that contract because it's getting us ready to either run, fight, or hide. So it brings your upper body and your lower body close together. So we have fight or flight, and then we have sitting in our modern world. And then when people stand up and they've been sitting for long periods of time, if they don't actually open up through the hip flexors, then they're bent, and that starts it. And it can be so subtle, you don't notice it for a while. And then one day you look in the mirror, just like, oh, how come I'm so crooked like that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, open up those hip flexors and open up your psoas muscles.
Right. And most of us would think I've got to bend backwards.
Yeah.
So much lower.
Yeah. So you can pull yourself up and out, but if you don't actually release the muscles that are holding you down, you can pull yourself up 10,000 times in a day. You're going to come back in until you actually release those muscles that create that. So pulling yourself out is not the fix.
Yeah.
Releasing what's holding you there is the fix.
And that's what I noticed after our session was, where I'd find myself hunching in the past, and I'd be like, oh, roll my shoulders up and back and bring my chin back and raise them up. But it doesn't last.
Yeah.
All of a sudden I'm back into a slump. But after we worked together, you released a lot of things, and it was like effortless. I didn't have to even roll my shoulders back. Like my spine just sat on top of it. Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating. So what would be a typical one-on-one somatic session? Could you just walk through what a client could expect to experience?
Yep. So one of the nicest things about somatics is that you keep your clothing on. So you don't have to undress. You come in and you lie on a table. It's usually nice and warm. And so we do an assessment, and then I have the person lie on the table. I usually like to start people on their backs. So then I get to see from standing, I saw how they were organized, and now lying down, things may shift and change. So they might look different lying on their backs. And then I'll spend a few minutes just kind of getting them to relax their nervous system. So I might just move their arms and legs a little bit without having them do much. Just let me move until I feel that they're actually settled and relaxed on the table. And then we do a technique called pandiculation. And pandiculation would be you have the person move into their tightness. So someone has a tight arm, tight shoulder. I would put my hand on their shoulder and ask them to just roll their shoulder into my fingers. So we get this moving into where they're tight. And then together, at a very, very slow movement, we move out. So it's not about moving in, moving out. That won't do anything. So it's coming in. So you're creating conscious contraction against a resistance. And then together, we create this conscious release. So it's an opening and a letting go. It's not a lot of people want to have a destination. So we move in, they want to be flat on the table. Well, now they're pulling themselves out with other muscles. So it's about teaching people that we're going to come in with a contraction. And now all you're going to do is first recognize what you just contracted. So I'm usually poking it or tapping. It's like, now you're going to release that muscle or those muscles and allow your bones to move away. So it's not about forcing and opening.
That forcing creates that unconscious program, then goes, oh, I have to engage and hold tighter. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Every movement we do together, I let the client know that we're working with this muscle right here. So if we're moving a leg, so you want to think of internal rotation, external rotation. So what creates external rotation? So the muscles here on the side of your hip, your tensor fasciae lata, your glute minimus, I'm going to have you contract those. So I just put a little pressure there. Can you feel that? All right. Now you're going to contract that as you move your leg out. That's how you move your leg. Who knew? Mm-hmm. So you're pushing leg outward, those muscles are contracting. You start to release the contraction and allow your leg to come in. And there'll be a natural stopping point if you're paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
But you easily move through it if you're moving too fast. So the whole session is done. It's like very slow, controlled. Some people at the end are like, I'm so tired. I felt like I wasn't doing anything, but I'm so tired. It's because they're concentrating, and the sessions are 75 minutes to an hour and a half. So for all that time, they're thinking, they're concentrating on their bodies. So it's also when people are finished, it can be an experience they've never had before. So there's this whole body awareness, and you're in your parasympathetic nervous system. So this peaceful, quiet place. And people sit up, and sometimes there's tears. It's like, oh my God, I feel amazing. I don't know if I've ever felt like this.
And it's so strange because it's subtly profound. I know those are the opposites, but it's subtle. But I mean, even for me, I stood up and I looked in the mirror and went, oh my God, my neck is so long. All of a sudden, my neck, it was like my shoulders had dropped down, my neck had lengthened. It was such a bizarre sensation. And what is it that you call it afterwards? Because it feels like you're a little out of it.
Yeah, I call it Soma head.
Soma head, yes. But I would imagine too, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you've been locked up in an area, there's going to be energy that's been locked up in there, whatever other things that can be locked up. And now that's flowing through your system. Like your body's going to need to detox that, either an energy or even an infection or anything, right?
Yeah, you're getting circulation where there hasn't been a lot, maybe for a long time, maybe for years. Yeah. You've got cells that are just like crying out for water because they haven't been able to get enough because it's so tight in there. So I always tell people drink lots of water after and to try to rest. Mm-hmm. Don't go out and go grocery shopping or cook a meal for a dinner party. You need to be able to spend some time being quiet, maybe going for a little walk, feel into your body, notice the difference, notice the changes.
And let it integrate.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'd imagine when working with someone, even just in a classroom setting, as people are releasing, a lot of emotion can come up.
Yeah, lots. And for some people, especially on the table, because it's just the two of us and it's very quiet, initially they're a little bit embarrassed because they're crying. I'm like, no, this is a perfectly normal experience of somatics. Is you're releasing. So often we contract something because of an emotion. We're holding something in. We tighten our diaphragm, especially. We hold our emotions right in our center. Something you want to say, but you are afraid to. You hold it right in your gut. Right? So many things we hold in our center. So when you start to open up the center of your body, you're going to release this windfall of emotion. And if you just let it go through you, have a few tears, the emotion will just be gone. It's not, then you don't have to go to a therapist and talk about it for a week.
And that's the thing I've done plenty of years of talk therapy. And I remember going to a somatic experiencing therapy. So different than what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I remember just that. I was just like, oh my God, why after all these years when I could have just been, checking into my body? And then I went to you and I was like, okay, this is even easier. Because also sometimes recounting, traumatic situations, experiences, then you're just reinforcing the story more and more, as opposed to just, okay, now we need to process it and let it go. And getting those emotions out and moving, it must be rewarding for you when someone just, releases something that they probably have stored up forever.
It really is. I work way too much. I'm 70. Keep thinking, I should be retired. but I can't imagine not doing this work. I'll probably be doing it for another 10 or so years because it's magical. And when what I feel when I'm working with a client, so we don't work on people, we work with our clients. That's a big difference.
Right.
But when I work with someone, every time I'm also getting somatics myself.
Right.
Because we're in that same state at the same time. So it's pretty incredible. Yeah, I feel like this work is a gift to me.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm continually learning. So once I studied somatics, then I became a yoga teacher as well. But
Yeah. What led you to getting into yoga?
I was invited by a girlfriend to come to her class, and I said no so many times because I'd been to yoga when I was in the throes of triathlon, and I didn't like yoga at all. I was like, "Oh, this is so boring."
I bet you weren't ready for it.
I wasn't ready. I didn't understand it. And so then I finally went to my friend's class, and I was so deeply touched and so moved by the whole experience that within a year, I decided to take the yoga teacher training. So I teach somatics, but I also teach somatics yin.
Oh, okay.
So I combine somatics with the yin practice. So we do somatic movements, and then we get into that yin shape and hold it for 4 or 5 minutes.
Can you just elaborate on what yin means for people who don't practice yoga?
Okay. So the yin yoga is a yoga that works more on connective tissue, not so much the muscles. So you get into a yin shape and you have lots of props and supports so that your muscles are not doing any work, but you are just creating a little either pressure or a little soft pull on your tendons, your ligaments, and the connective tissue, your fascia. So you get this deep, deep, gentle opening without straining or any stress. And it's also very mindful. So you have to focus on the breath as you go into the shape and you hold it and you focus on the breath. So you're noticing your thoughts because thoughts will come and go. You'll want to get out of that shape more than anything. So then you want to look at why. Why is that? So it's a very deep practice.
Yeah, and I would imagine
And
the somatic instruction while someone's in a yin pose.
Yeah, it's incredible. So when I do my own yoga practice, I do a little bit of Ashtanga, but I do it from the somatic perspective, which is quite different. So I'm always thinking about how am I holding myself? Sometimes when I'm in a yoga class and I don't like standing in the back of the room because I'm looking at people that I want to go and move.
I was going to ask, that must be really difficult for you. Like you're around with this. It's like almost like a psychic medium or something. And they're walking around and they have these messages they want to tell people, but you can't just interrupt. It must be hard. You've got these skills and you see someone twisted or I've seen a couple of videos online of different therapists who, they're just like, I have to go talk to this person. I will work on them for free. I just want to fix them, I mean, and if you can be of service, of course, why wouldn't you want to be? It's understandable. But also it does present you with some challenges. We were talking about it prior to recording. Can you tell us a bit about
this? Well, I've many times I've thought it would be nice if when I'm at work, if I could be at work and then if I can turn it off. Because when I'm out in the world, I'm still looking and seeing what goes on with people. And it's very much in my nature. Like I want to be helpful. And when I first started the somatics practice, I think that's how I actually built up my practice, because I would see people that were obviously struggling. And I would say, you got something going on with that right hip of yours? And they're like, how do you know that? Like, well, I can see that you're, a little uncomfortable in there. I could give you a couple of little pointers that might help you with that. And so, I don't do that as much anymore.
Because you have too many clients. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great problem to have.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But I just want to say about the yoga studio that I go to, because my classes are very popular there. So the owner of the studio, who's a friend of mine, Deborah, she has totally embraced the teachings of somatics in her teachings of yoga. And it's really beautiful. I was just at a workshop yesterday on arm balances, and she had everyone first, before they would even begin the practice, we did a little green light, red light session. It's like, how do you hold yourself? Are you more green light or are you more red light? And how will this affect your yoga practice? So it was beautiful.
That's interesting. Yeah. Because in an arm balance, you don't want to be too far forward or too far back, or you're going to end up flat on your back.
That's right.
Or if if you're already in green light before you get into it,
you're going to fall right over, and you won't have the strength either where you need it. Yeah, it was really awesome.
It's actually really fascinating because I was, into weight training and running and cycling and all that kind of hard exercise. And I remember going to a hot yoga class, and the only it's like a gateway yoga, hot yoga, because you can take an athletic person and put them into hot yoga, and you have that additional challenge of the heat. So it feels and the instructor quite assertive. Let's put it that way. Like it's push, push, push. And so I think it appealed to the athlete in me.
Yeah.
And then as I started to discover, I was like, oh, there's other types of yoga. And then it was like, oh man, I don't like hot yoga at all. As I started to do all the different kinds.
Yes.
I started to become more aware of the internal and the breathing and the emotions. Yeah. That's what brought me into it. And so, yeah, it makes a lot of sense that you would have been resistant to it at first too.
One of the things that I think is really apparent for me was that in my athletic life, and I would have never said this about myself back then, but I had a certain rigidity to the way I lived. And I had very strong likes, dislikes, beliefs. And so it's like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, that's a waste of time and blah, blah, blah. Or I was very strict with my diet. I only ate certain foods. And I look at it now as a rigidity, but I had the same rigidity in my whole body.
Right.
And I think they kind of pair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once I started to soften in my body, I was able to soften the way I look at the world and how I receive things. I'm willing to take more risks, more chances, and do things, with the word spirituality attached to it, which I would have never done 30, 40 years ago.
That's interesting. What doesn't bend breaks, right? And that's, I remember going to flow yoga and being like, oh, flow. Flow? Like water? As opposed to this rigidity? Yeah.
I used to say I'm very well disciplined. In actual fact, I was very rigid.
Right. No, I'm just disciplined. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations for resources or tools on somatics?
Yeah, there's a couple of practitioners that have written books. Thomas Hanna, that's the training I took. It's called Hanna Somatics. And unfortunately, he died in 1990. But he wrote a book called Somatics, Reawakening the Mind's Control of Movement, Flexibility, and Health. And it's so full of valuable information. The pictures in it are terrible, but the information is priceless.
Right.
And then there's a woman called Martha Peterson, and she was one of Thomas's students. And she has written a book called Move Without Pain. And her book is very similar to Thomas's, not quite as scientific, but she has great descriptions and pictures of somatic movements. So I always recommend that to my clients. There's another book, it's called Why We're in Pain, and that's written by Sarah St. Pierre. And there's no pictures, no description of movements, but it's very detailed into the fight or flight patterns and all the holding that we create and how to come out of it. It's a very good read as well. There's one of my teachers, her name is Susan Koenig, Koeneg. And she has all kinds of YouTube classes and movements. She does a class once a month in California, and it's all free. And she is an incredible resource. In her classes, she always does a little teaching section first. So she's teaching people about their bodies before she goes into the movement class. She's pretty darn close to 80, and she still is a practitioner, and she still is a teacher at the Somatic Institute. There's a website. It's called the Somatic Institute of Novato, California, Association for Somatics Education. And you can go on that website and find anything you want to know about somatics. They even have a map of all the practitioners in North America, which is very handy.
About 10 years ago, when I was venturing into osteopathy, and I would mention it, no one would know what I was talking about. I feel like that's where somatics is now. You mention it, and people either get it confused with somatic experience versus, what's yours called again specifically?
Somatic education. It's a somatics. Yeah, somatics. Yeah.
That's leading into our wrap-up question, which is reflecting on your life. Can you share a personal experience where a situation that initially seemed like lead, heavy and burdensome, was alchemically transformed into precious gold, revealing unexpected treasures?
I think that the things that happen in our lives, what we would call a negative experience, is actually just kind of a teaching moment if we take it that way. So when I first had whiplash, I was working at a pool, teaching swimming and teaching triathletes. And I had such severe headaches that I had to take time off work, but it was life-changing because that's when I moved from just working for recreation. I moved into becoming a personal trainer and working for myself. That was the first big change. That was the start of my moving into a different path in my life.
Had you not been in that accident, who knows if that would have unfolded.
I think that the biggest one, and it's very personal, but one of my sons ended up going to jail. And at first I was so distraught and devastated, but it's actually been like the most incredible journey for both of us. So he totally has transformed his life. He is the most precious human that I have in my life. He's learned so much. And because of him, I did the same work that he did that I never thought I needed. But I did the work because he was doing it. And what I learned about myself was huge. And so many things that we can label as so bad and so awful, just have to flip it over. Just kind of look at the belly of it. And there's that gold. There's that softness we land into. It's like, wow, I didn't know this was going to happen.
I think that's one of the beautiful things about getting older is you start to accumulate enough of those experiences that when the next bad thing happens, you go, I wonder what this is happening for me. Why is this happening for me? As opposed to, why is this happening to me? And the more you can look back, you can connect the dots and be like, oh man, I wouldn't have met that person. I wouldn't have taken that course. I wouldn't have left that job if I didn't absolutely have to, right? Yeah. Pretty beautiful life. So Judy, I just want to wrap up with you and just thank you for, first of all, carving out the time to do this, because not only did you work with us 3 days in a row, but also just commend you for your passion for learning. Like, not a lot of people let their curiosity keep motivating them. So by doing that, you've really impacted so many people's lives and helped them live fuller lives. So no wonder you keep wanting to do it. But I just want to say thank you for all your efforts and then just for sharing your wisdom today. It's really awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Another huge thank you to Judy for her time and insights. For the listeners, Judy can be found at willowsomatics.com or at willowsomatics on Facebook. Okay, Have you ever heard of electroacupuncture according to Vol, or EAV? If not, you're in for a treat. In our next episode, Sonia Christie, a certified integrative health practitioner and chartered herbalist, is here to spill the beans on this fascinating testing system. And one last thing, we can only keep creating this awesome content if you keep tuning in. So spread the love, subscribe, share, and help us grow our community. If you have any thoughts, drop a comment on your favorite podcast platform or reach out to us directly at alchemyofhealing.ca.